Have you ever watched a father drag his own daughter to court, only to discover she owns everything he thought was his? 7 years ago, I was just another disappointment to my father, a girl who chose accounting over construction, spreadsheets over blueprints. He'd introduce me at family gatherings as the one who wastes time with calculators. What he never knew was that while he mocked me publicly, I was secretly saving his entire legacy from foreclosure. This is the story of how a courtroom full of his peers watched him crumble when he learned the truth. Hi everyone, I'm Muriel Torres, 32 years old, and what I'm about to share happened just 3 weeks ago in a Boston courthouse. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. Let me paint you a picture of last year's Thanksgiving. Picture this. 23 family members gathered around my parents' mahogany dining table, well, my father's table, as he loved to remind everyone. I'd just finished explaining how I'd helped Patterson Construction restructure their accounts, saving them from a massive IRS audit. Dead silence. Then my father raised his bourbon and said, "Well, when you do real work like your brother Michael here, then we can talk." Michael, who builds strip malls. Me? I'm just a paper pusher with a CPA license that put me in the top 5% in Massachusetts. That's been my life for as long as I can remember. Richard Torres, my father, built his reputation laying foundations across Boston for 30 years. To him, real work meant calloused hands and steel-toed boots. My Ernst & Young business card might as well have been written in invisible ink. When clients asked about his family at construction sites, he'd spend 20 minutes bragging about Michael's latest project, then add, "Oh, and Muriel does," something with numbers. The irony? While he was dismissing my career, I was managing portfolios worth more than he'd built in his lifetime. But every family gathering followed the same script. Michael's achievements got standing ovations, while my promotions got polite nods and subject changes. "Sweetheart, nobody really understands what you do anyway," he'd say, usually after his third drink. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I understood numbers well enough to see the crisis coming before anyone else did. And when it hit, those calculator games he mocked would become the only thing standing between him and complete ruin. The Seaport District project was supposed to be my father's masterpiece, a $15 million mixed-use development that would cement his legacy. Instead, it became his downfall. In March 2018, his biggest investor pulled out, taking 2 others with him. Within 6 weeks, Torres Construction filed for Chapter 11. The Seaport project took everything, my mother would later say, except his pride. My parents' marriage couldn't survive the bankruptcy. Mom filed for divorce in February 2019, moving to her sister's place in California. She took half of nothing and left behind 30 years of memories. I still remember Dad sitting in his empty office, surrounded by boxes, insisting this was temporary, and he'd bounce back stronger than ever. Then came Jessica. She showed up at a builders convention in 2022, 33 years old, blonde, with a real estate license and an uncanny ability to make my 58-year-old father feel like he was 30 again. They married 6 months later in a courthouse ceremony I wasn't invited to. "It's just a formality," he told me over the phone. "You understand." Here's what nobody understood. Why was I still there? Why did I stay in Boston, visiting the house every week, checking on a man who introduced me as his underachieving daughter? My friends thought I was crazy. My therapist used words like codependent and seeking validation. But they didn't see what I saw in the bankruptcy documents. They didn't know about the second mortgage, the one with the balloon payment due in 2019. The one that would take the house, our family home where my mother raised us, where my grandmother's rosebush still bloomed every spring. So I made a decision that would change everything, though it would take 7 years for anyone to know. $5,357. That's what it took every single month to keep the wolves from Wells Fargo's door. Every month for 84 months, like clockwork. While my father was telling his poker buddies I was playing with spreadsheets, I was actually working 3 jobs, days at Ernst & Young managing corporate accounts. evenings consulting for two tech startups, Vertex Development and Atlas Building Solutions, weekends doing forensic accounting for law firms. I averaged 4 hours of sleep and lived on protein bars and black coffee. The logistics were complicated. I couldn't pay the mortgage directly. Dad would notice and his pride would implode. So I routed everything through my mother's old joint account that he'd forgotten existed. The bank statements went to a P.O. box I'd set up. When he bragged about managing to keep the house despite everything, I bit my tongue so hard it bled. The exhaustion was bone deep. I missed friends' weddings, canceled dates, spent Christmas Eve 2020 finishing a client's year-end audit. My colleague Sarah once found me asleep at my desk at 3 a.m., laptop still running Excel projections. "Muriel, you're killing yourself," she said. "Whatever you're doing, it better be worth it." Was it worth it? Every time I walked through that front door and saw my grandmother's chandelier still hanging in the foyer, I told myself yes. Every time I passed the pencil marks on the doorframe marking Michael's and my height through the years, I told myself yes. This wasn't just a house. It was our history. I kept meticulous records. Every payment, every transfer, every document filed in a safety deposit box at First National. Just in case, I told myself, though I wasn't sure in case of what. The paperwork at the county clerk's office was particularly interesting. Public records that anyone could access, if they knew where to look. The morning I made payment number 84, the final payment, I sat in my car and cried. 7 years of sacrifice, and nobody would ever know. Or so I thought. Jessica discovered the house's value the way she discovered everything, by snooping. I caught her in Dad's study one October afternoon, photographing documents with her phone. "Just organizing Richard's files," she said, flashing that practiced smile. The Zillow estimate on her screen said $850,000. $850,000, Richard, I heard her screech that night from the driveway. "This house is worth nearly $1 million, and that ungrateful daughter of yours is circling like a vulture." The thing about Jessica? She used to be a paralegal. She knew just enough law to be dangerous and just enough manipulation to make my father listen. "She's been planning this for years, Richard. Wake up. Why else would a single woman her age still be coming around? She doesn't even have a boyfriend. She's obsessed with this house." My father naturally bought every word. Why wouldn't he? Here was his young, beautiful wife warning him about his disappointing daughter's schemes. The same daughter who'd never amounted to anything was apparently masterminding some elaborate fraud. "She probably thinks I'll leave it to her when I die," I heard him tell Jessica. "Joke's on her. I'm changing my will tomorrow." The irony was breathtaking. While they were discussing protecting his asset from me, I was literally the only reason he still had an asset to protect. But Jessica had planted a seed that would grow into something much uglier. 2 weeks later, she convinced him to have the house appraised. Then she found a lawyer, not just any lawyer, but Jonathan Whitmore from Whitmore and Associates, who specialized in asset protection and elder financial abuse cases. The trap was set. All it needed was the right trigger, and Jessica knew exactly which buttons to push. November 2nd, 2024, 6:47 p.m. I remember because I was heating up leftover Thai food when the doorbell rang. The marshal looked uncomfortable. "Muriel Torres?" When I nodded, he handed me an envelope thick with legal documents. "You've been served. Have a good evening, ma'am." My hand shook as I read the header. Richard Torres, Plaintiff v. Muriel Torres, Defendant. The words blurred together. Fraud, undue influence, conversion of property, conspiracy to commit elder abuse. My own father was suing me for $850,000 plus punitive damages. The complaint was a masterpiece of fiction. According to the filing, I had systematically manipulated an elderly man. He was 58. Exploited his vulnerability during financial distress, and conspired to fraudulently obtain his primary residence. The documents claimed I'd been living in his house without permission, refusing to leave despite repeated requests. Page 3 stopped my heart. Plaintiff requests an emergency hearing to prevent defendant from further damaging or encumbering the property. The hearing date, November 15th, 2024. 13 days away. I called my mother in California. She answered on the second ring, and I could hear her gasp when I told her. "That bastard," she whispered. "After everything you've done." "Mom, he doesn't know about the payments." "Then tell him." "He's taking me to court. He's already hired Whitmore and Associates. Mom, this is public record now. Everyone will know." The silence stretched between us. Finally, she said, "Baby, you kept every receipt, right? Every document?" "Everything." "Then let him hang himself. Call Thomas Mitchell. Remember him from your CPA study group? He's a lawyer now, a good one." I hung up and stared at the summons. At the bottom, in my father's handwriting, was a note. "You have been summoned to appear at Suffolk County Courthouse, Courtroom 12. Don't embarrass yourself further by fighting this." The war he'd started was one he couldn't possibly win. He just didn't know it yet. Thomas Mitchell answered on the first ring. "Muriel Torres, as I live and breathe. How's the best CPA in Massachusetts?" "I'm being sued by my father, Tom." The silence lasted 3 seconds. "I'll clear my schedule. How soon can you get to my office?" 2 hours later, I sat in his downtown office with 7 years of documentation spread across his conference table. Bank statements, mortgage payments, transfer receipts, tax returns, my entire secret life laid out in neat chronological order. Tom's expression shifted from concern to amazement to something that looked like rage. "Muriel, you have more proof than you realize," he said, holding up a document I'd almost forgotten about. "This county clerk deed transfer from June 15th, 2021. Your father signed the house over to you completely. Look at the notary stamp." He was drunk at the time. Jessica had just left him briefly after a fight, and he came crying to me about possibly losing the house. He signed it thinking it was a refinancing document. "Doesn't matter. It's legal, notarized, and filed with the county. You own this house free and clear. Have for 3 years. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Whatever happens, I'm proud of you. Dad would be too." She meant my grandfather, who'd built that house with his own hands in 1962. Tom leaned back. "Here's what's going to happen. Your father's about to learn a very expensive lesson about gratitude. But Muriel, this is going to get ugly. He's not just going to lose the case. He's going to be humiliated. Are you prepared for that?" Was I? For 7 years, I'd protected him from the consequences of his failures. I'd sacrificed my 20s, my relationships, my health, and in return, he'd mocked me, dismissed me, and now wanted to destroy me in court. "Tom, I need you to pull something else for me. The Builders Association directory. I have a feeling my father's been very busy inviting an audience to my humiliation." Tom's smile was sharp. "Muriel, by the time we're done, the only person getting humiliated is him, and it'll happen in front of everyone whose opinion he values." I signed the retainer agreement with a steady hand. No turning back now. The Facebook post in the Boston Builders Association group had 847 reactions and 234 comments by the time Tom showed it to me. "Fellow builders and friends," my father had written, "I need your support on November 15th at Suffolk County Courthouse. My own daughter is trying to steal my family home through fraudulent means. I want witnesses to see what happens when we stand up to entitled millennials who think they deserve everything without working for it." The comments were brutal. "Kids these days have no respect. Probably spent all her time on TikTok instead of working. This is why I wrote my ungrateful son out of my will." But then Tom scrolled down to a comment that made my stomach turn. It was from Robert Patterson, CEO of Patterson Construction, one of my biggest clients. "Richard, is this the same daughter who's a CPA? The one you told me couldn't manage a lemonade stand?" My father had replied, "That's the one. Biggest disappointment of my life. Never held a real job, just plays with computers all day. Now she wants what I've worked 30 years to build." He doesn't know, does he? Tom asked quietly. That you saved Patterson's company from bankruptcy last year? No one knows. I used my mother's maiden name, Mitchell, for my consulting work. I didn't want my father's reputation affecting my career, ironically enough. Tom pulled up another window. He's also hired a PR firm, Kingston Communications. They're planning to make an example of you. There's going to be media there, Muriel. He wants to destroy you publicly. How many people has he invited? Based on the RSVP list I found, at least 200. He's chartered 2 buses from the Builders Association. He's treating this like a field trip to watch his ungrateful daughter get put in her place. I thought about all those men who'd watched him dismiss me at barbecues and holiday parties, who'd laughed when he'd called me his expensive mistake after I'd chosen college over trade school. They'd all be there expecting a show. Tom, I need David Carson from Wells Fargo to testify, and someone from the county clerk's office. Can you arrange that? Already on it. Muriel, your father just signed his own professional death warrant. He just doesn't know it yet. David Carson will be there, Tom confirmed, hanging up his phone. Wells Fargo is actually eager to help. Turns out they've been wondering how those payments kept coming when your father was technically insolvent. We sat in his conference room, organizing 84 months of bank statements into pristine exhibits. Each payment highlighted, annotated, cross-referenced with my income deposits. The paper trail was beautiful in its completeness. The county clerk is sending Margaret Smith, Tom caught himself. She's been there 20 years, remembers your father from his permit-pulling days. She's bringing the original deed transfer with all the authentication stamps. What about the 3 CEOs? Patterson, Atlas, and Vertex all agreed to provide written statements. Patterson's actually flying back from Miami to attend in person. He's upset about your father's Facebook posts. Says it's time people knew who really saved his company. I watched Tom arrange our evidence like he was planning a symphony. Document A would lead to Revelation B, which would cascade into Bombshell C. The key, he said, is to let your father hang himself first. Let him rant about your worthlessness, your lack of real employment, your gold-digging nature. The deeper he digs his hole, the more spectacular the collapse. Tom, there's something else. Jessica used to work at Whitmore and Associates as a paralegal. His eyes lit up. Conflict of interest. Beautiful. We'll save that for dessert. He pulled up his laptop. I'm filing a counter motion, not just for dismissal, for full legal fees, damages for defamation, and a restraining order if he continues harassment. Is that necessary? Muriel, he tried to destroy you publicly. We're going to make sure he never tries it again, with anyone. He paused. Your therapist was right, you know. This isn't about revenge. It's about boundaries. Very expensive, very public boundaries. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, type justice in the comments. This story is about to take a turn that shocked everyone in that courtroom. Before we continue, please hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Because what happens next proves that sometimes the best revenge is simply showing the receipts. Let's continue. November 14th, 11:47 p.m. I couldn't sleep. My laptop screen glowed with 3 emails that had arrived within the last hour. Patterson Construction's CEO. Muriel, you saved my family's legacy. Tomorrow, everyone will know it. Atlas Building. Your forensic audit uncovered $800K in employee theft. We owe you everything. Vertex Development. That tax strategy you designed saved us $700K. Proud to support you tomorrow. Combined, I'd save these 3 companies $2.3 million. Tomorrow, their CEOs would sit in a courtroom where my father claimed I'd never worked a real job. My mother called via FaceTime from California. Her eyes were red. I booked a flight, baby. I'll be there by noon tomorrow. Mom, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I should have stood up to him years ago. I won't make that mistake again. She paused. There's something you should know about the deed transfer in 2021. My stomach tightened. What about it? I was on the phone with him that night. He was drunk, crying about losing everything. He said, At least Muriel will take care of things. She always does, even when I don't deserve it. He knew exactly what he was signing, honey. He just doesn't remember. I stared at the safety deposit box key on my nightstand. Inside that box was more than just paperwork. It was proof of 7 years of love disguised as duty. Tomorrow, that love would finally demand respect. Tom texted at 12:15 a.m. Can't sleep either? Remember, let him talk first. Let him tell everyone what a disappointment you are. Every word he says is another nail in his coffin. Your silence until the right moment will be deafening. I pulled out the deed one more time. There it was in black and white. Richard Torres hereby transfers all rights and ownership to Muriel Torres. Notarized, filed, legal. There was one thing about that deed my father definitely didn't know. Something that would change everything when revealed at just the right moment. Suffolk County Courthouse, November 15th, 8:45 a.m. The Builders Association buses were already there, parked like tour coaches at a theme park. Men in flannel and work boots streamed into the courthouse, many carrying coffee from Dunkin'. I recognized most of them, the same faces that had watched my father dismiss me for years. That's her, I heard someone whisper. The ungrateful daughter. I counted at least 12 of my father's poker buddies in the lobby. They avoided eye contact, but I could feel their judgment. These were men who'd heard every story about my failures, real and imagined, over cigars and whiskey. Richard arrived at 8:55 in his black Mercedes. Jessica on his arm, in a designer suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Behind them, a parade of lawyers from Whitmore and Associates, 5 in total, all carrying leather briefcases like weapons. Muriel! My father's voice boomed across the courthouse steps, ensuring everyone could hear. I hope you're prepared to apologize and make this right. It's not too late to avoid complete embarrassment. Tom appeared at my elbow. Let him perform, he whispered. Look, 3 reporters just took notes. What Richard didn't notice were the 3 CEOs sitting quietly in the back, or David Carson from Wells Fargo reviewing his files, or Margaret Smith from the county clerk's office holding a sealed folder. But I noticed something else. At least 15 women in the crowd, some in hard hats, others in business suits. Female contractors, architects, engineers. They weren't here for Richard. One caught my eye and nodded slightly. Word had spread beyond my father's echo chamber. Jessica stage whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. She looks nervous. Guilty people always do. 200 people filed into courtroom 12. My father had his audience. He just didn't know who they'd be applauding by the end. All rise for the Honorable Judge Margaret Sullivan. Judge Sullivan entered courtroom 12 at exactly 9:00 a.m., her silver hair pulled back severely, black robes pristine. She surveyed the packed gallery with raised eyebrows. Mr. Whitmore, is there a reason we have an audience for what should be a straightforward property dispute? Jonathan Whitmore stood, all 6 feet of him radiating confidence. Your Honor, given the serious nature of elder abuse allegations, my client felt community support was important. I see. Her tone suggested she saw right through it. Proceed. Whitmore launched into his opening statement like a practiced performer. Your Honor, this is a clear case of elder financial abuse. Richard Torres, a hard-working contractor who built his reputation over 30 years, is being systematically defrauded by his own daughter. She has refused to leave his residence, has manipulated financial documents, and has taken advantage of a vulnerable senior citizen during his time of financial distress. I watched my father nod along, his jaw set in that familiar expression of righteous indignation. Jessica rubbed his shoulder supportively, playing the concerned wife perfectly. The defendant, Whitmore continued, gesturing at me like I was Exhibit A, has never held stable employment, has no significant assets of her own, and has been living parasitically off her father's generosity. We have evidence of systematic deception spanning years, Your Honor. This is a daughter who saw an opportunity to steal from her own father and took it. Tom stood slowly. Your Honor, The defense will show that not only are these accusations completely false, but that Mr. Torres's claims are so divorced from reality that they constitute malicious prosecution. We have documentary evidence that will shock this courtroom. Judge Sullivan looked between us. Mr. Torres, you may take the stand. My father walked to the witness box with the swagger of a man who'd already won. He adjusted the microphone, looked directly at me, and smiled. The performance was about to begin. State your name for the record. Richard Torres, owner of Torres Construction for 30 years until my daughter destroyed my life. Judge Sullivan's eyes narrowed. Mr. Torres, please just answer the questions asked. Whitmore smiled. Mr. Torres, tell us about your daughter's employment history. My father leaned into the microphone like he was sharing gossip at a bar. She's never worked a real job in her life, Your Honor. She plays with calculators, makes spreadsheets, little computer games she calls accounting. Meanwhile, real professionals like myself and my son Michael actually build things, create value. And her living situation? She refuses to leave my house. Been squatting there for years, probably waiting for me to die so she can steal it completely. He looked directly at his poker buddies. I tried to be a good father, gave her every opportunity, but she's only after my money. Always has been. Mr. Torres, do you have evidence of your daughter's alleged unemployment? Richard laughed, the sound echoing through the courtroom. Evidence? Look at her. 32 years old, no husband, no family, just obsessed with my house. She probably doesn't even know what a mortgage payment looks like. I doubt she could calculate interest if her life depended on it. Several builders in the gallery chuckled. Jessica smiled triumphantly. Tell us about the house in question. My family home, Your Honor, built by my father in 1962, worth $850,000 today thanks to my maintenance, my improvements, my reputation in this community. And now she wants to steal it using some forged documents she probably created on her computer. Whitmore held up a stack of papers. Mr. Torres, are these your financial records? Yes, showing how I've maintained that property despite my bankruptcy, through hard work and determination, not sitting behind a desk playing with numbers like some people. Another pointed look at me. Judge Sullivan interrupted. Mr. Torres, do you have any proof your daughter has never been employed? Proof? She's never shown me a real paycheck in her life, just talks about consulting and clients, probably code words for living off others. Tom whispered in my ear. Perfect. He just perjured himself at least 3 times. The plaintiff calls Jessica Torres to the stand. Jessica walked to the witness box like she was on a runway, her heels clicking against the floor. She placed her manicured hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth with practiced sincerity. Mrs. Torres, Whitmore began, tell us about your stepdaughter's behavior. It's concerning, Your Honor. Deeply concerning. Jessica's voice dripped with fake worry. I've caught her multiple times going through Richard's private documents. She hoards financial papers in her room like some kind of obsession. I think she might have mental health issues. Can you elaborate? She comes to the house at odd hours, sometimes just sits in the driveway staring at it. She's told me multiple times that the house belongs to her and that Richard owes her everything. It's frightening, honestly. A 32-year-old woman this fixated on her father's property? It's not normal. Several people in the gallery murmured. I saw one of the reporters taking rapid notes. Mrs. Torres, have you witnessed any concerning financial behavior? Jessica leaned forward conspiratorially. I found bank statements hidden in her old room. Thousands of dollars moving through accounts. Complex transfers designed to hide something. As someone who worked as a paralegal, I recognize money laundering when I see it. Tom whispered, Perfect. Let them continue. And her relationship with Mr. Torres? She manipulates him constantly, uses guilt about the divorce, about his bankruptcy. She knows exactly which buttons to push. Last month, I heard her on the phone saying everything is going according to plan, and he has no idea what's coming. Your Honor, I'm genuinely afraid of what she might be capable of. Judge Sullivan looked skeptical. Do you have any documentation of these claims? Well, no, but I see. You may step down. As Jessica returned to her seat, she shot me a triumphant smile. Richard reached over and squeezed her hand. Tom stood up. Your Honor, the defense is ready to present our case. Proceed, Mr. Mitchell. The entire room seemed to lean forward. Whitmore wasn't done. Your Honor, before the defense proceeds, I'd like to submit these bank records as evidence. He produced a stack of papers with theatrical flair. These show systematic transfers from hidden accounts to the mortgage holder over several years, classic signs of financial manipulation and potential money laundering, as Mrs. Torres correctly identified. The gallery erupted in whispers. I heard someone say, "I knew something was off about her." Furthermore, Whitmore continued, his voice rising, these transfers coincidentally began right after Mr. Torres's bankruptcy, when he was at his most vulnerable. The defendant saw an opportunity to exploit her father's weakness and took it. Richard stood up suddenly. She's been stealing from me for years, Your Honor. While I was rebuilding my life, she was scheming behind my back. Mr. Torres, please sit down, Judge Sullivan warned. But the damage was done. The crowd was turning. I could feel their judgment like heat from a fire. One of the builders shouted, "Gold digger!" Another yelled, "Shame on you!" Jessica dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, playing the concerned wife perfectly. This is exactly what we expected from someone with no real career, no real accomplishments, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Whitmore moved in for the kill. Your Honor, we're talking about a 32-year-old woman who has never held a legitimate job, living off her elderly father, manipulating financial documents, and now trying to steal his only remaining asset. This isn't just fraud, it's a betrayal of the most sacred trust between parent and child. The gallery was fully on their side now. I saw disgust on faces I'd known since childhood. Robert Patterson from Patterson Construction was shaking his head, probably wondering how he'd missed the signs when I'd worked with his company. This is what happens, Richard announced to his audience, when you raise an entitled child who thinks the world owes her everything. She never learned the value of hard work, never built anything with her own hands, just learned to take. Judge Sullivan looked at me. Ms. Torres, your counsel may proceed with your defense. Tom stood slowly, deliberately, carrying a single manila folder. Your Honor, he said calmly, I'd like to call the defendant to the stand. My legs felt like water as I stood. 200 pairs of eyes followed me to the witness box. Someone whispered, "Here comes the excuses." I placed my hand on the Bible, feeling the weight of 7 years pressing down on my shoulders. The courtroom was silent except for the scratch of reporters' pens. Ms. Torres, Tom began, his voice steady, do you have something you'd like to present to the court? I opened my briefcase with deliberate calm, though my heart was hammering. Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit A. The manila folder felt heavier than it should as I pulled it out. Inside was a single document, the one that would change everything. Your Honor, this is a certified copy of a deed transfer from the Suffolk County Clerk's office. Whitmore jumped up. Objection! We haven't seen this document in discovery. Tom smiled. It's a public record, Your Honor, available to anyone who bothered to look. Judge Sullivan nodded. I'll allow it. Continue, Ms. Torres. I held up the document so the gallery could see the official seal. This deed, dated June 15, 2021, transfers complete ownership of the property at 451 Beacon Hill Road from Richard Torres to Muriel Torres. The silence was absolute. I saw my father's mouth open, but no sound came out. That's impossible, he finally managed. I never signed anything like that. Your Honor, I continued, my voice gaining strength, I've been silent for 7 years. No more. This deed was signed, notarized, and filed with the county 3.5 years ago. The house my father is suing me for, I already own it. I've owned it since 2021. Jessica shot up from her seat. That's fraud. She forged it. Judge Sullivan banged her gavel. Order, Ms. Torres. Is there someone who can verify this document's authenticity? I looked toward the gallery. Yes, Your Honor. Margaret Smith from the county clerk's office is here. The crowd parted as Margaret stood, holding an identical folder. Margaret Smith walked to the witness stand with the authority of someone who'd spent 20 years dealing with property documents. She was sworn in quickly, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp. "Ms. Smith," Tom addressed her, "can you verify this document?" She opened her folder, revealing the original deed with its raised seal. "This is the original deed transfer filed on June 15, 2021 at 3:47 p.m. I processed it personally." She held it up. "You can see Mr. Richard Torres's signature here, notarized by Jennifer Walsh, license number 487291. "That's impossible," Richard shouted. I would never," Margaret continued calmly. "Mr. Torres, you were quite intoxicated when you came in that day. You kept saying your daughter was the only one who really cared, and that you wanted to make things right. The notary almost refused to proceed, but you insisted you were of sound mind." The gallery exploded. Builders were turning to each other in shock. The reporters were scribbling frantically. "Furthermore," Margaret added, "you came back the next week to verify the transfer had been processed. You said, and I quote, 'I want to make sure Muriel gets what she deserves for everything she's done.'" Jessica's face had gone white. "Richard, you told me the house was yours." Judge Sullivan studied the document. "Mr. Whitmore, your client is suing Ms. Torres for a house she legally owns and has owned for 3 years. How do you explain this?" Whitmore was speechless for the first time, frantically flipping through his papers. "But that's not all, Your Honor," I said, standing straighter. "I'd like to submit Exhibit B, 84 consecutive mortgage payments from my personal accounts." Tom handed another folder to the judge. "Your Honor, we have David Carson from Wells Fargo here to verify these payments." Richard slumped in his chair. "No, this isn't. She couldn't have." "Oh, but I did, Dad," I said, looking directly at him. "Every month for 7 years, while you called me worthless, I was saving your legacy. While you mocked my calculator games, I was the only thing standing between you and complete ruin." The builders in the gallery were no longer looking at me with disgust. They were staring at Richard in disbelief. David Carson from Wells Fargo took the stand with the confidence of someone holding irrefutable proof. He carried a thick folder that he placed deliberately on the witness stand. "Mr. Carson," Tom began, "can you tell the court about these mortgage payments?" "Certainly. From November 2017 through October 2024, exactly 84 consecutive payments of $5,357 were made on the mortgage for 451 Beacon Hill Road. Every single payment came from accounts belonging to Muriel Torres." He opened the folder, revealing page after page of bank statements. "The total amount paid, $449,988. Without these payments, the property would have been foreclosed in January 2018. And Mr. Richard Torres' payments during this period? 0. Not a single dollar. In fact, Mr. Torres hasn't had an account with us since his bankruptcy filing." The courtroom was dead silent. I watched my father's face crumble as the reality hit him. "That's not possible," Jessica whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Richard said he was managing the payments himself," David continued. "Ms. Torres often made these payments while working 16-hour days. Our records show transfers at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., sometimes minutes after her direct deposits from Ernst & Young cleared. She never missed a single payment, even when it meant her own account would be nearly empty." One of the builders in the gallery stood up. "Richard, you told us she was a leech. You said she was bleeding you dry." Judge Sullivan raised her gavel for order. "Sir, please sit down." Tom pulled out another document. "Mr. Carson, can you verify this particular transfer from December 2019? "Yes. Ms. Torres paid $21,428 to prevent foreclosure after the balloon payment came due. She liquidated her entire 401k, taking a massive tax penalty to save the property." I heard gasps throughout the courtroom. My mother, who had quietly entered during the testimony, was crying in the back row. Richard's voice was barely a whisper. But, but why didn't she tell me? Because you would have refused, I said clearly. Your pride would have rather lost the house than accept help from your disappointment of a daughter. So I did what I always do. I fixed things quietly while you took the credit. Jessica was frantically pulling at Richard's arm, hissing something about leaving, but he sat frozen, staring at the bank statements like they were written in a foreign language. Your Honor, Tom announced, we have 3 more witnesses who would like to testify about Ms. Torres's employment history. Robert Patterson stood up from the gallery. Several builders turned in shock. He was one of the biggest names in Boston construction. Your Honor, may I speak? Judge Sullivan nodded. Please take the stand, Mr. Patterson. Robert Patterson of Patterson Construction. He looked directly at Richard. The same Patterson Construction that Richard has been trying to get a contract with for 5 years. After being sworn in, Patterson's voice filled the courtroom. Last year, Muriel Torres saved my company from bankruptcy. She discovered $800,000 in embezzlement that our previous accountant had hidden. She worked around the clock for 3 weeks, reconstructed 5 years of records, and helped us recover most of the stolen funds. The builders were whispering frantically. Richard's mouth hung open. She saved 43 jobs, including my own son's. And she did it all under the name M. Mitchell to, quote, avoid any conflict of interest with her father's business. She never wanted credit. She just wanted to help. Tom called the next witness. James Morrison, CEO of Atlas Building Solutions. Morrison's testimony was equally damning. Ms. Torres redesigned our entire financial system, saved us $700,000 in the first year alone. She's not just a CPA, she's in the top 5% in Massachusetts. We tried to hire her full-time, offered her $225,000 a year, but she said she had family obligations to attend to. The third CEO, Sandra Chen from Vertex Development, delivered the final blow. Muriel Torres currently makes $275,000 annually from her consulting work alone. That's not including her Ernst & Young salary. She's one of the most sought-after forensic accountants in Boston. She paused, looking at Richard with barely concealed disgust. And Mr. Torres, half the contractors in this room have benefited from her work. She's been doing their books, saving their businesses, all while you've been telling everyone she's worthless. I saw recognition dawning on faces throughout the gallery. Wait, M. Mitchell is Muriel? Someone said. She saved me from an IRS audit last year. Richard had gone pale. Jessica was trying to disappear into her seat. Judge Sullivan looked at Richard. Mr. Torres, do you still maintain your daughter has never held a real job? The sound Richard made wasn't quite a word. It was something between a gasp and a moan as he sank into his chair, his face the color of ash. This isn't possible, he mumbled, his hands shaking as he reached for the water glass that wasn't there. She's just what, Richard? One of the contractors stood up, Mike Brennan, who'd been at every poker game for 15 years. Just the daughter you've been trash-talking while she secretly kept your house from foreclosure? She saved my business last year, and I didn't even know it was her. Whitmore stood hastily. Your Honor, we need to request a recess to— Sit down, Mr. Whitmore, Judge Sullivan commanded. Your client brought 200 witnesses here to watch him humiliate his daughter. They can stay to watch the truth. Jessica was already edging toward the aisle, her designer heels clicking against the floor. I need to use the restroom, she whispered, but everyone could hear the panic in her voice. You stay right where you are, Mrs. Torres, the judge ordered. The gallery had transformed into a chorus of recognition and outrage. She restructured my contracts last spring. She found $50,000 in tax savings for me. Richard, you told us she was unemployed. Someone in the back started recording on their phone, then another. Within seconds, dozens of phones were out, capturing Richard's complete destruction. Tom pulled out his phone and showed it to the judge. Your Honor, Mr. Torres's Facebook post about this hearing has just received over 300 new comments in the last 10 minutes. Would you like me to read some? That won't be necessary. Patterson stood up in the gallery. Richard, I'm terminating our negotiations effective immediately. I don't do business with men who sue their own children for houses those children paid for. Four other contractors immediately voiced their agreement. Richard's professional network was collapsing in real time, and everyone was watching. Please, Richard whispered, but it wasn't clear who he was addressing. His eyes darted between me, the judge, and the exits, like a trapped animal looking for escape. Can you imagine the look on his face? After 7 years of calling me worthless, the truth was finally out. If you think families should support each other, not tear each other down, give this video a thumbs up. And remember, sometimes the best response to disrespect is documented proof. Now, let me tell you what happened next. Judge Sullivan looked at me. Ms. Torres, would you like to address the court? I stood slowly, feeling 200 pairs of eyes on me. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't the disappointment in the room. Your Honor, I need to explain something. Despite everything you've heard today, I need everyone to understand. He's still my father. Richard's head snapped up, tears streaming down his face. When his business collapsed, when Mom left, when the bank came calling, he was still my father. That's why I did it. Not for gratitude, not for recognition, but because that's what family does. We show up, even when it's hard, even when we're not appreciated. I pulled out my phone and opened an email. But there comes a point when love becomes enabling, when sacrifice becomes self-destruction. My mother wrote this to me last night from California. I read aloud. My darling daughter, for 7 years I've watched you kill yourself to save a man who couldn't even say thank you. You are not his ATM. You are not his emotional punching bag. You are not responsible for his failures. You are my brilliant, successful daughter who deserves respect. It's time to demand it. The women in the gallery were nodding. Some were crying. Your Honor, I won't be both his financial savior and his public humiliation anymore. I won't attend family dinners where I'm mocked for the career that saved his house. I won't smile politely while he tells everyone I'm worthless, then secretly deposit thousands into his mortgage. I turned to face Richard directly. Dad, I loved you enough to sacrifice my 20s, my relationships, my health. But love doesn't mean accepting disrespect. Love doesn't mean being grateful for crumbs of acknowledgement. Love doesn't mean letting you drag me to court to steal what I already own. Tom handed me one final document. Your Honor, this is a restraining order request, not because I fear physical harm, but because I need boundaries. Real, legal, enforceable boundaries. Richard was sobbing now, the kind of ugly, broken sobs that come when a man's entire worldview collapses. You gave me life, Dad. I gave you 7 years. We're even. Judge Sullivan removed her glasses, cleaning them slowly while the courtroom held its breath. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. In 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen a case that so clearly demonstrates the difference between legal wrongdoing and moral bankruptcy. She looked directly at Richard. Mr. Torres, you haven't just wasted this court's time with a frivolous lawsuit. You've revealed yourself to be a man who would publicly humiliate the very person who saved you from ruin. You invited 200 people to watch you destroy your daughter, only to discover she's been your guardian angel. Richard couldn't meet her eyes. This case is dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Torres, you will pay all legal fees, both yours and your daughter's, totaling $45,000. You will have no claim, now or ever, to the property at 451 Beacon Hill Road. She turned to me. Ms. Torres, your restraining order is granted. Mr. Torres is prohibited from coming within 500 feet of you unless you explicitly invite contact. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. The gavel came down hard. Furthermore, Mr. Torres, I am issuing a formal censure that will be entered into public record. Your conduct today was not just legally wrong, it was morally reprehensible. The gallery erupted in applause. Several women stood up, clapping. The builders looked stunned, but many were nodding in agreement. Mr. Torres, Judge Sullivan continued over the noise, you should be ashamed. This young woman saved your home, your dignity, and asked for nothing in return except basic respect. Instead, you gave her mockery and lawsuits. You are exactly the kind of father that daughters write cautionary tales about. Whitmore was already packing his briefcase, his face red with embarrassment. We won't be filing any appeals, Your Honor. I should hope not. This case is concluded. Mr. Torres, you have 30 days to pay the legal fees. Court is adjourned. As the gavel fell for the final time, Richard collapsed forward onto the defendant's table, his shoulders shaking with sobs. The courtroom erupted into chaos the moment Judge Sullivan left. 5 contractors surrounded Richard before he could even stand. Our contract is terminated, effective immediately, Mike Brennan announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. I don't work with men who sue their own daughters for houses they paid for. Same here, added Tony Rodriguez. That Marina District project? Find another subcontractor. Within minutes, Richard had lost contracts worth over $2 million. Each cancellation was announced publicly, deliberately, in front of the crowd he'd assembled to witness my humiliation. Jessica had vanished. Someone later told me they saw her in the parking garage, throwing her wedding ring at Richard's Mercedes before getting into an Uber. She'd lasted exactly as long as the money had. My phone was already buzzing. A text from the Boston Builders Association president. Emergency board meeting called. Richard's membership under review for conduct unbecoming. But the real devastation was happening online. Someone had been live streaming on Facebook. The video already had 10,000 views and climbing. The comments were brutal. Worst father in Boston. How do you sue someone for a house they bought for you? This man destroyed his own reputation in HD. Whitmore approached Richard with papers. Mr. Torres, this is a withdrawal of representation. My firm will no longer work with you in any capacity. He turned to me. Ms. Torres, I apologize for my role in this. I was clearly misled about the facts. Then, loud enough for everyone to hear, he added, Oh, and Jessica? She used to work for us. We fired her for ethics violations. Should have known she was involved in something like this. Richard finally stood, looking around the emptying courtroom like he didn't recognize it. His poker buddies had all left without saying goodbye. The builders who'd cheered him on an hour ago were now posting photos of the deed transfer on social media with captions like, Plot twist of the century, and Richard Torres just played himself. Tom showed me his phone. You're trending on Boston Reddit. The title is Local Contractor Sues Daughter for House She Secretly Paid Off, Gets Destroyed in Court. It's the top post. Richard stumbled toward the exit, completely alone. The man who'd arrived with an entourage and a swagger left with nothing but a $45,000 bill and a shattered reputation. I found him in the courthouse parking lot, sitting on the hood of his Mercedes, looking every one of his 58 years, and then some. The crowd had dispersed, the buses gone. It was just us and the November cold. Muriel. His voice was broken, hollow. Don't. I stopped 10 feet away, maintaining distance. You don't get to play victim now. You destroyed me. No, Dad. You destroyed yourself. I just refused to hide the evidence anymore. He looked up, his eyes red and swollen. Why didn't you tell me? About the payments? Would you have let me? Or would your pride have rather lost the house than accept help from your disappointment of a daughter? He flinched. I never meant. Yes, you did. Every joke at Thanksgiving, every dismissive comment at your poker games, every time you introduced Michael's achievements while pretending I didn't exist. You meant every word. The silence stretched between us. Finally, he whispered, What happens now? Now you face consequences. Your business will survive or it won't. Your reputation will recover or it won't. But it's not my problem anymore. Muriel, please, I'm your father. You were my father when you dragged me into court. You were my father when you called me a gold digger in front of 200 people. Being my father doesn't erase what you did. I pulled out a business card. This is Dr. Patricia Reeves. She's a therapist who specializes in narcissistic personality disorder and family trauma. You're going to need help understanding why you did this. He took the card with shaking hands. And if I go? If I get help? Then maybe, someday, we can have a conversation that doesn't end with you humiliating me. But that's not today, and it won't be tomorrow. The house is mine, legally, morally, and practically. You can rent the guest house for $1,500 a month if you can behave yourself, below market rate, because despite everything, I'm not cruel. But there will be a lease, rules, and consequences. I'm sorry, he whispered. No, you're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. I turned to leave, then stopped. Dad, I'm done being your emotional and financial safety net. It's time you learn to stand on your own. I walked away, leaving him alone in the parking lot with his shame. By Monday morning, my inbox had exploded. 15 new client inquiries, all from people who'd either been in the courtroom or seen the video. We had no idea Mr. Mitchell was you, one wrote. Richard always said you were unemployed. We'd like to discuss a retainer immediately. The Boston Globe ran the story on Tuesday. CPA daughter saves father's home, gets sued in return. They'd somehow gotten a photo of Richard crying in the courtroom. The subtitle read, How One Woman's Secret Sacrifice Became Boston's Most Talked About Family Drama. My mother flew in from California Wednesday. We sat in the house, my house, drinking wine and reading the comments on the viral video, which had now reached 2.8 million views. This one's my favorite, she said, reading from her phone. Imagine being so ungrateful that you sue the person who saved your house. It has 45,000 likes. The Women's Business Association called Thursday. Ms. Torres, we'd like to honor you at our annual gala. Your story has resonated with so many women who've been undervalued by their families while secretly holding everything together. Tom forwarded me a screenshot from LinkedIn. 3 different headhunting firms had posted about me, calling me Boston's hidden financial genius and the CPA who saved a company while being called worthless. But the most satisfying moment came Friday afternoon. Robert Patterson called personally. Muriel, I'm ashamed I didn't stand up for you sooner. I knew Richard was difficult, but I had no idea what you were going through. I'd like to offer you a permanent position, Chief Financial Officer, $350,000 base plus equity. By the end of the week, my story had become something bigger than family drama. It had become a rallying cry for everyone who'd ever been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed by the very people they were helping. Week 2 brought the professional aftermath. The Builders Association voted unanimously to revoke Richard's membership, a devastating blow in an industry built on relationships and reputation. The letter was formal but brutal. Your conduct toward your daughter reflects values incompatible with our organization's standards. Jessica filed for divorce on Tuesday, but the real shock came when TMZ picked up the story. Apparently, she'd already been dating Whitmore for months. Someone photographed them at a restaurant the night after the trial, toasting with champagne. The caption, Lawyer celebrates with client's soon-to-be ex-wife after courtroom disaster. Richard's business imploded faster than anyone expected. By Wednesday, he'd lost 70% of his contracts. The remaining clients were only staying because they were mid-project and couldn't afford to switch contractors. His Facebook business page had been review-bombed with 1-star ratings and comments like, sues his own daughter for a house she paid for, and definition of ungrateful. He had to sell the Mercedes to pay the legal fees. Then the boat he'd bought during his successful period, the one he'd named self-made, without any sense of irony. The garage sale notice appeared in the Globe's classifieds, a public admission of his downfall. Michael, my brother, finally called from Arizona. I had no idea, Muriel. Dad told me you were living off him. I'm so sorry I believed him. The golden child was finally seeing our father clearly. Patterson Construction announced my CFO appointment in a press release that deliberately mentioned the trial. We're proud to welcome Muriel Torres, whose financial expertise saved numerous Boston businesses while her own father claimed she was unemployed. It was picked up by every business journal in New England. By the end of week 2, Richard Torres had gone from respected contractor to cautionary tale. Pride goeth before a fall, and his fall had been spectacular, public, and entirely self-inflicted. I stood in my grandmother's house, my house now, and made decisions that would have been impossible a month ago. The contractor I hired was one of the women who'd applauded in the courtroom, Sarah Brennan, Mike's daughter. We'll convert it into 2 units, she explained, spreading blueprints on the kitchen table. The main house for you, a completely separate guest unit with its own entrance. Good boundaries make good neighbors, even when the neighbor is family. The renovation would cost $75,000, but the rental income would cover it within 2 years. The guest unit could rent for $3,500 a month in this neighborhood, though I had other plans for it initially. My mother stood in the doorway of what would become her apartment. Honey, I don't need... Mom, you gave up everything in the divorce to get away from him. Let me give something back. Stay as long as you want. Forever if you like. She cried then, the kind of grateful tears that come when someone who's been strong for too long finally gets to rest. I kept my grandmother's chandelier and the pencil marks on the doorframe, but everything else was getting updated. The house would finally serve a positive purpose, not as a monument to Richard's ego or a burden I carried secretly, but as an investment in my future. Sarah's crew found something during demolition, a time capsule my grandmother had hidden in 1962. Inside was a photo of the house's groundbreaking and a note. May this home always shelter those who need it most, and may it never be a source of family strife. I framed the note and hung it where Richard's Torres construction vanity photo used to be. The house was finally becoming what my grandmother had intended, a sanctuary, not a battlefield. December arrived with snow and a text from Michael. Dad's living in his truck. I found Richard at a Dunkin' Donuts at 6 a.m., looking like he'd aged a decade in a month. His hands shook as he lifted his coffee. The confident contractor who'd strutted into court was gone, replaced by someone hollow and lost. Michael called you, he said. It wasn't a question. You can't live in your truck through a Boston winter. I've got no choice. No one will rent to me after... He gestured vaguely at nothing. After everything went viral. I placed a lease agreement on the table. Guest house, $1,500 a month, first and last up front. These are my terms. He read through tears. Weekly therapy with Dr. Reeves. AA meetings twice a week. No overnight guests without written permission. Monthly family counseling if I choose to attend. He looked up. These are strict. They're boundaries, Dad. Something we should have had years ago. Why? His voice broke. After everything, why would you? Because I won't enable you, but I won't let you be homeless either. This isn't forgiveness, it's practicality. You need shelter. I need a tenant who'll maintain the property, but this is business now, not family. He signed with shaking hands. For the first time in my memory, Richard Torres cried without trying to hide it. Not the angry tears of a narcissist exposed, but the broken sobs of a man finally understanding the weight of what he'd destroyed. Thank you, he whispered. Don't thank me. Thank the grandmother who built this house to shelter those who need it most. And Dad, if you violate even one term of this lease, you're out. No second chances. He nodded, understanding that this wasn't reconciliation, it was consequence management. Tom reviewed the lease one more time before the notary arrived. This is more thorough than most commercial agreements, he said, impressed. The terms were non-negotiable. $1,500 monthly rent, half market rate for the area, no alcohol on the property, mandatory therapy sessions with provided receipts, AA meetings with signed attendance sheets, no disparaging comments about me to anyone, ever. No visitors without 48-hour written notice. Monthly property inspections. Quiet hours from 9 p.m. to 8 a.m. Participation in family therapy if I requested, maximum twice monthly. If he violates any term, I explained to the notary, eviction proceedings begin immediately. Richard signed every page without protest. The man who once commanded rooms now sat silent, accepting terms from the daughter he'd tried to destroy in court. The family therapy, he said quietly. You said if you choose, will you? Not yet, maybe not ever. That depends entirely on your progress with Dr. Reeves. The notary stamped the final page. It was official. Richard was now my tenant, paying rent on a property he'd once claimed was stolen from him. I handed him the keys. The guest house is furnished. Utilities are included. Your first therapy appointment is Monday at 10 a.m. Don't miss it. Muriel, No speeches, Dad. No promises. Just actions. Prove you can follow basic rules. Prove you can respect boundaries. Prove you understand what respect actually means. He stood to leave, then turned back. The house looks different. Renovations? Yes. Mom's moving into the main floor apartment. The house is finally becoming what Grandma intended, a home for people who treat each other with respect. The implication was clear. Earn respect. Earn family. Without it, he was just a tenant. February brought unexpected changes. Dr. Reeves called with Richard's permission to share his progress. He's been sober for 90 days, she reported. More importantly, he's beginning to understand the generational patterns. His father belittled him the same way he belittled you. The difference is, you broke the cycle. Richard had started journaling, she said, writing letters he'd never send, processing decades of toxic masculinity and inherited shame. He'd even joined a support group for narcissistic abuse, from the perpetrator's side. The first email came on Valentine's Day. Muriel, Dr. Reeves says I'm not ready for a real apology yet because I don't fully understand what I'm apologizing for. But I want you to know I'm trying. I'm learning words like emotional labor and financial abuse. I'm learning that love isn't supposed to come with scoreboards. Your tenant, Richard. He'd signed it your tenant, not your father. That was progress. My business had exploded. Patterson Construction's announcement had triggered a cascade of opportunities. Revenue was up 150%, and I'd hired 2 junior CPAs to handle the overflow. The girl who'd never worked a real job was now running a growing financial consulting firm. Mom had settled into her apartment, turning it into a haven of plants and paintings. Sometimes I'd catch her and Richard passing in the driveway. They'd nod, nothing more. Boundaries holding firm. Michael visited in March. The three of us, Mom, Michael, and I, had dinner while Richard stayed in the guest house. He knows he's not invited yet, Michael said. That's actually huge for him. Change was possible, but trust? Trust would take years to rebuild, if ever. And for the first time in my life, that timeline wasn't my problem to manage. Richard was finally learning that respect wasn't inherited with DNA, it was earned with behavior. 3 months later, I signed a book deal with a major publisher. Financial Abuse in Families, A Survivor's Guide to Setting Boundaries, would be released next spring. The advance alone was more than Richard had made in his best year. The story had resonated far beyond Boston. I received hundreds of emails from people trapped in similar situations, successful adults still seeking approval from parents who'd never give it, financing families who publicly mocked them, enabling relatives who confused blood with bondage. Family should be a source of support, not a license for disrespect, I told the journalist from Forbes. We're taught that family is everything, but sometimes everything is too much. Richard had submitted to a public apology, not because I asked, but because Dr. Reeves said it was part of his recovery. He posted it on the same Facebook page where he'd invited people to my humiliation. I was wrong. I sued my daughter for a house she paid for. I mocked her career while she saved my life. I chose pride over truth and lost everything that mattered. I'm in therapy now, learning to be the father I should have been. To everyone who witnessed my shameful behavior, I'm sorry. To Muriel, I'm sorry isn't enough, but it's where I'm starting. It had 50,000 shares. The comments ranged from too little too late to at least he's trying. I didn't respond. Social media apologies weren't my metric for change. Success, I'd learned, wasn't about proving your worth to people who refused to see it. It was about recognizing your own value and demanding others recognize it too, or removing them from your life. The house my grandmother built was finally at peace. Not because we were a happy family again, but because we'd learned the architecture of boundaries. And sometimes the strongest foundations are the ones that keep people at precisely the right distance. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've dealt with toxic family members who mistake kindness for weakness, remember, setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's necessary. Please subscribe if this resonated with you and share your own boundary setting victories in the comments. I read every single one, and remember, sometimes the greatest revenge is simply refusing to be anyone's doormat anymore.